I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk, here today at the 2023 IPO Summit taking place at the New York Stock Exchange. And joining me is Priya Huskins. She is partner and SVP at Woodruff Sawyer. Priya, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Judy.
Now, I'm excited to talk with you, but before we do that, just a quick note to our viewers. This interview is for informational purposes only. The NYSE doesn't recommend any investments or investment strategies. All right, so Priya, tell me about your role at Woodruff Sawyer.
So Woodruff Sawyer is a full-service insurance brokerage. We're particularly well known for working with companies as they are getting ready to go public, as they go through that IPO or direct listing, de-SPAC window, and on to their public company life. And what I do at Woodruff Sawyer is I counsel companies and their directors and officers on ways to mitigate their risk of unlimited personal liability. There are so many positives about being public, and unfortunately a downside is you are subject to litigation.
So you just mentioned you do counsel your clients on corporate governance matters, ways to reduce exposure to shareholder lawsuits, and regulatory investigations. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, so it generally starts with good governance, and what's really wonderful for my role is I can leverage what companies are naturally doing with their outside counsel and their board members when it comes to corporate governance. What are the controls and procedures that exist in the management environment that make litigation less likely, or if it comes up, makes it go away faster and for less money? So we're going to leverage what's already happening, but in some sense optimize it with a real focus on potential shareholder litigation or regulatory oversight. And that can be both insurance and non-insurance solutions. So I want to start with corporate governance. So think of that as the fire sprinklers of director and officer risk. But no matter what you do, you may get into some litigation issues, and that's when the insurance comes in. And so being able to think ahead of time about what's the chassis for your insurance program for a fast-growing company or a company going public, a mature public company, there's a lot to be done. It's highly nuanced, and it's actually a great thing that I get to do for companies.
All right, so Priya, tell me, what advice do you have for companies as they prepare to go public when it comes to insurance?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is work with an expert. There are actually 40,000 commercial insurance brokerages on the planet, and many of them do a great job for a company when they're an earlier stage company. But as you get big enough that you have something to lose, it is time to transition to working with experts. And particularly if you're planning to do an IPO or you're a new public company, those are companies that get sued a lot. In fact, about a quarter of all IPO companies will see stock drop litigation within their first 3 years of going public. And this is high stakes, very expensive litigation. So my first piece of advice is think about who can explain the risk to you and who has the bona fides to help you either mitigate that risk or transfer it to an insurance company. And then the second part is start a little bit early. You don't want to be circling around what's our final offering price and think about insurance. I really like to see people start thinking about insurance about 18 months ahead of when they're planning to launch their IPO process. My last thing is, I think it's very obvious that director and officer liability insurance is going to be important. It's certainly obvious to the directors. But I'd also say, from an entire risk management perspective, you want to be ready for public company scrutiny. So expand the aperture a little bit. Think about cyber liability insurance and the other types of insurance that a well-functioning, mature public company will end up having.
All right, well, Priya, wonderful to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on Floor Talk today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.